Noel Happily was born on April 28, 1926 in Morroville, Alabama. While enrolled at Morrow County High School, Nell Happily developed her interest for literature. So consequently, one day, she abandoned her job to dedicate herself to a great novel published in America in 1961, what would then be a eminent masterpiece, To Kill a Mockingbird. As a Southern Gothic novel, the primary themes of To Kill a Mockingbird involve racial injustice and the destruction of innocence. Lee also addresses issues of class, courage, compassion and gender roles in the American Deep South. The book is widely taught in schools in the United States, with lessons that emphasize tolerance and decry prejudice. A book that gained an amazing success, which saw the writer awarded with one of the most illustrious titles ever, the Pulitzer Prize for Literature, the same year of the publication. In 2007, President George W. Bush rewarded the writer with the highest U.S. civil honor, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. In Italy, the novel came out in 1962. The original title, To Kill a Mockingbird, was replaced with Il buio oltre la siepe, Darkness Beyond the Edge. We can give voice to a fundamental question of this masterpiece. It's titled The Jewel of a Crown, in which there are the most beautiful diamonds that a book of this kind can ever contain. The English version shows the mockingbird, a bird living in America but unknown in Europe, which imitates the lines of other birds and is almost innocuous, linked to two of the main characters of the whole story. In Italian, therefore, a literal translation of the title would not have done in the same way, so the translators of that time solved this first problem by completely changing it. In my opinion, the Italian version, given the issue addressed, succeeds in transmitting the feeling of insecurity and fear linked to the things we don't know, which unfortunately, in most cases, represents what's at the root of racism. Injustice and rebellion, these are the two key words hidden among the pages of the novel that is set during the period of Great Depression, in which the prejudice and hatred of whites against blacks increased considerably. The story takes place in the sweeping heat of the south of the USA, in Alabama, in a fictional tidal town of Mockingbird, a purely agricultural town where the locals run the very few existing shops or are engaged in agriculture and sheep farming, but nothing more, being a small town in which schooling is almost non-existent and where unfortunately ignorance reigns supreme with the fear of the other. In the same city, there's a large community of blacks, and it is on this basis, the coexistence of blacks and whites in such a small town, that the novel develops. In Maycomb live the main characters of the book, the Finch family, consisting of Atticus' father, highly respected lawyer in the town, a point of reference because of his noble profession, a widow who lives with his two children, Jeremy, affectionately named Jem, and his daughter Jane Louise, nicknamed Scout, and their cook and baker, a woman of color, beloved as she was part of the family, Mrs. Calpurnia. Harper Lee's novel is narrated by Scout Finch, a very smart girl with a unique sympathy that scandalizes the city's women for an orthodox language, with her eyes innocently revealing the cruelties of the racial conflicts of the age with a background of magical, childish games. The first half of the book is focused on the description of Maycomb's life, habits and customs, but also about the Finch family and Jem and Scout's mischiefs. In particular, the two kids with their friend Dill were fascinated by their neighbor's house, a house of a young man who had been detained there since he was about 10 years old and had never left, living as if he were a beast. The oldest of Maycomb never talked about Boo, and few of them have seen him for many years. The children feed one another's imagination with rumors, and taken by the curiosity of discovering the face of this boy, the three children always played at his home. The second part talks mainly about Mr. Atticus. Judge Taylor appoints Atticus to defend Tom Robinson, a black man who has been accused of raping a young white woman, Mayella Violet Ewell. Atticus agrees to defend Tom to the best of his abilities, realizing that Tom represents a scapegoat and it is only an innocent creature. All the evidence he had been able to provide would have exonerated him, but the community has now found it guilty due to the fear of the different ones, the fear of the other. So Maycomb had already given his verdict. Scout's eyes tell the whole process, and she asks everyone, why fighting against an innocent creature? It's not right. As a result of the process, after defeat, Tom loses his life, and so was to happen to the lawyer's two children, Jem and Scout. But thanks to the different Boo, both are saved from the father of the raped girl, of whom is actually the aggressor. Boo remembered them, and found it funny that someone was interested in understanding who he really was, instead of going away or ignoring him, such as the rest of the people, from whom he was only despised. As in tradition, there's also a cinematic transposition of this novel. The film received overwhelmingly positive reviews from critics and was a box office success, winning 3 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. In 1995, the film was listed in the National Film Registry. In 2007, the film ranked 25th on the AFI list of the greatest American movies of all time. The movie, like the book, is divided into 2 main parts that upset the lives of the protagonists. First, the mystery of the Radley house, and the unjust condemnation of Tom Robinson, that Atticus defends with all his strength, but unfortunately, by making him loser. This last character is played by magnificent Gregory Peck, he rewarded with the Oscar. Usually, there are many differences between the film and the novel that lead to an artistic gap and heated debates about director choices, but this time, we can say that the differences are not substantial, except for some, still not fundamentally significant for Lee's key message. For example, in the film there is no mention of the origins of Atticus, while in the book we find a description of his family. He had a younger brother, John Ale, who studied medicine in Boston because of Atticus' investment. He also had a sister, Alexandra, the only member of the Finch to stay at the Finch's Landing, which is another element not mentioned in the movie. In my opinion, a big mistake is not to have told the whole story of Boo. According to the legend, when Boo was 15, he tied up with some of the Cunningham boys of Old Sarum. One night, they ran around the square, going backwards on an old car. Most city dwellers decided to do something, and when the boys got in front of the judge, he decided to send the boys to the public institute. And Arthur, the real Boo's name, didn't go because of his father, and after he had talked with the judge, for 14 years, no one saw Mrs. Radley's son anymore. However, one day, Jem just remembered that many were the people to see and hear Boo Radley. Jem did not see him, though, so he got most of the information from Miss Stephanie Crawford, another character cut into the movie, a grown-up neighbor, always aware of everything. According to Mrs. Crawford, one day, Boo sat in the living room, cutting out the traps to be glued to his album. His father came into the room, and Boo, when he heard him passing by, kicked the scissors into the leg. Therefore, Boo was locked in the basement of the court, from which he was released after a while. Another missing episode in the movie is a family Christmas lunch, in which Scout was playing with his cousin Francis, and he speaks badly about Atticus, saying that he's a nigger lover, and that Scout and Jem represented the ruin of the family because they were grown up just like animals. She reacts by giving him a fist on his face, and caught up in the act, the others blame her for her violent ways of reacting. However, as they come home, Uncle Jack enters the room to understand better the situation, for then discover the truth. Episode of paramount importance, since in a mere infantile bickering, we can find a child's feelings for his or her parent, touching points that go beyond the main novel's themes. In fact, the novel has been noted for its poignant exploration of different forms of courage, and more than eminent was the interpretation of the famous Gregory Peck in the role of Atticus in the central episode of the story, Tom Robinson's Process, in which the famous speech of the book is based on the inexistence of racial inequalities. This is the reason why, in 2003, the American Film Institute named Atticus Finch the greatest movie hero of the 20th century. Finally, if there's one episode I loved more in the movie than in the book itself, is the closure. In the middle pages of the novel, there's a simple sentence with a deep meaning permeated of noble sentiments. Atticus told me, "You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it." In the film, this phrase was articulated in a broader way, closing in brilliantly.
One time, Atticus said, "You never really knew a man until you stood in his shoes and walked around in them." Just standing on the Radley porch was enough. The summer that had begun so long ago had ended, and another summer had taken its place, and a fall, and Boo Radley had come out. I was to think of these days many times, of Jim and Dill and Boo Radley and Tom Robinson and Atticus. He would be in Jem's room all night. And he would be there when Jem waked up in the morning.
A phrase pronounced by an old scout that leaves a typical feeling of emptiness after watching a film, leading the viewer to reflect on a topic that touches not only the key message of the whole masterpiece, but also the sense of empathy that every person should feel one another.